Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
You're listening to The National as published on Friday the 11th of February 2022. News. Angus MacNeil calls for action on ferries from Transport Scotland by Jane MacLeod, journalist. An SNP MP is calling on Transport Scotland to act urgently on the current issue facing the network to the Hebrides. Angus MacNeil, the representative for Nehallan and Nanier, is writing to the agency stressing the urgent need for a fast assessment of the service to the islands, where 4 ferries are currently out of service. After months of constant contact with the Scottish Government and CalMac regarding the network, MacNeil wants Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth to stress once again the need for prompt action. He wants Transport Scotland to start with an urgent, short, sharp assessment on the current situation, carried out within a month. MacNeil is backing calls by Cornwall, Nanier and Shear, the local council, and others for action. The current disruption to the Lifeline network is due to 3 vessels being in dry dock and the critical MV Hebrides being out of action with engine trouble, meaning the island's network is 4 vessels short. MacNeil said, "At the moment there has been a construction delay, as we know, at the Ferguson's Yard in Greenock. We need more ferries, as had been identified by the coroner and others. A logical consequence of what Cornwall, Nanier and Shear is calling for is that inquiries must be made with shipyards in Poland and Germany that have built CalMac ferries in the past. The Pentalina, meantime, would look like a stopgap if it is fully seaworthy and there are no problems with it. Another obvious issue to be addressed is that the CalMac board has to have islanders on it, and I would suggest that the council leader and transport chairman be entrusted with these responsibilities." He added, "We wouldn't have other bodies in Scotland without people resident in Scotland on them." This article was by Jane MacLeod. You're listening to The National as published on Friday the 11th of February 2022. News. Skerry Vore to honour promise to open Scottish Traditional Boat Festival by Jane MacLeod, journalist. Scottish trad rockers Skerry Vore are set to honour a pledge to headline the opening concert at the Scottish Traditional Boat Festival. After making the promise back in 2019, the band will finally play the live stage at Portsoy's big gig on Back Green on June the 17th, after COVID restrictions put paid to them bringing their distinctive brand of rock to the town for 2 years running. Skerry Vore whetted appetites with a set recorded exclusively for the Ahoy Portsoy Virtual Boat Festival last year, which attracted thousands of viewers from around the world. Now the chance to see them perform in person at Portsoy is being met with eager anticipation, according to David Urquhart, chair of the Scottish Traditional Boat Festival Committee. He said, "It's taken time, but Skerry Vore will certainly be worth the wait, as this will be a top-rate concert that will set the tone for the return of our in-person festival. Following on from the interest shown in our 2021 virtual festival, we're eager to get people back to Portsoy to enjoy the real thing, savouring a distinctly nautical atmosphere with heritage boats, maritime crafts, sailing and rowing events. All this alongside a medley of music, dance, crafts, food and drink marquee, stalls, road races, children's entertainment and much more." This article was by Jane MacLeod. You're listening to The National as published on Friday the 11th of February 2022. Politics. Neil Coyle loses Labour whip after racist comment to journalist by Laura Webster, News and Features Editor. Labour MP Neil Coyle has had the whip suspended following allegations he made racist comments to a journalist on the parliamentary estate, a party spokesman said. Coyle, the MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, has been accused of using offensive language in conversation with a reporter at Stranger's Bar, who said it caused him to feel uncomfortable in my place of work. Henry Dyer, who covers politics for Insider, said he reported the alleged comments to the Commons Speaker, who he said took immediate action with his staff and suspended Coyle from the bars on the estate pending an investigation. A Labour spokesperson said, "The Labour Party expects the highest standards of behaviour from all our MPs, and we take allegations of this sort very seriously. Accordingly, the Chief Whip has now suspended the Labour Whip from Neil Coyle, pending an investigation." It is understood that after Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle became aware of Mr Dyer's allegations, he convened a meeting with the Sergeant-at-Arms, who ordered that Coyle should be suspended from bars in the Commons for 6 months. Authorities in the House of Lords are believed to have taken similar action. Dyer, who is British Chinese, said he came into contact with Coyle in Stranger's Bar on the evening of Tuesday, February the 1st, after going for Chinese New Year dinner with his family. He accused the MP of making xenophobic remarks, which he said made him feel uncomfortable. Dyer claimed he had also witnessed Coyle angrily shouting at a Labour staffer in the bar the previous evening. On the morning of Thursday, February the 3rd, Dyer said he informed the Speaker what had happened. The Speaker and his staff took immediate action in conjunction with the Sergeant-at-Arms and the House of Lords authorities to suspend Coyle from the bars on the parliamentary estate, pending an investigation by the Labour Whip's office into the incident on Monday and Tuesday evening, he said. The House of Commons declined to comment. Coyle has been approached for comment. This article was by Laura Webster.
From the National, Friday the 11th of February 2022, from the comment section, why food policy should be a core issue in the council elections, by Ruth Watson, founder of the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign. The Good Food Nation Bill is making its way through our Parliament thanks in no small part to a dedicated work by the Scottish Food Coalition, a collective of activists and stakeholders. The bill means the Scottish Government would, for the first time, put into law an obligation on ministers and local authorities to put food at the heart of policy making. Consideration would have to be given to the social and economic well-being of communities, as well as the impacts on our health and that of the natural world. The proposed Human Rights Bill would enshrine the right to food in Scots law. This is increasingly crucial to many of us as food prices spiral upwards, forcing people into miserable circumstances. The bills will, in many ways, pull together a range of initiatives enabling local authorities to make progressive, powerful changes to procurement and the delivery of food within communities. Around half of Scotland's councils have a firm commitment to providing freshly prepared local food in their schools, and the potential for positive change is impressive. Jane Jones is a commercial manager at Argyll and Bute Council. She speaks with passion about the importance of this initiative. Breaking tenders into small lots provides opportunities for local businesses and creates a community-led environment. On the Isle of Islay, a local farmer and a local butcher provide fresh island produce to the children. Islanders work in the wee school kitchen. Local providers often like to stay small and serve their local community. We're open to having conversations about that, Jones said. She points out to a supplier at Oban as an example of the local procurement building sustainable networks. Jones says, 10 years ago, he only provided fruit and vegetables in Oban, but now, through the contacts created within the network, he delivers across a greater area. Dealing with the local authority gives him guaranteed quantities, so he can do regular deals with local farms. It's not always about economic growth, but economic sustainability. When buying from national suppliers, Jones still tries to buy Scottish produce. Buying local, buying Scottish, it is all about our green recovery as a nation, meeting our United Nations sustainability goals, working towards community wealth building, and creating good quality local jobs. Faced with years of Westminster austerity and repeated budget cuts, many councils have slashed funding for school meals. Argyll and Bute has gone in the other direction. I view school meals as an investment in our children's future, Jones explains. Good quality food for children helps to close the attainment gap and provides better health outcomes. The Flexible Food Fund helps us reach people who have never had to approach welfare for help before and are unaware of the support that they're entitled to, like free period products. So this is a gateway to helping people in other ways too. Last week, the Scottish Food Coalition held a public meeting entitled Advancing the Right to Food, where speakers discussed how to ensure that the proposed food policy is a meaningful, integral part of human rights in Scotland. Healthy, sustainable food is a fundamental need. Progressive local authorities are leading the way, delivering powerful wellbeing policies which build up our communities. As we face this devastating cost of living crisis, now is the time to be demanding positive action from our elected representatives. As we approach the local authority elections in May, candidates should be left in no doubt this is a core issue they will be expected to deliver on. Scotland is a wealthy nation. Let's feed all our people to the best of our land has to offer. That was a comment piece by Ruth Wilson, the founder of the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign.
This article is from The National, date 14th February 2022, from the News section. Scottish university staff to walk out for 10-day strike against pension cuts. By Gregor Young. Staff at 8 Scottish universities will walk out today as a union begins 10 days of industrial action in its battle to stop what its leader has described as brutal pension cuts. Over the next 5 days, university workers from Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Heriot-Watt, St Andrews, Stirling, Strathclyde and the Open University in Scotland will strike after the University and College Union, or UCU, said they had refused to withdraw cuts to their pension scheme. The action will continue over the following 2 weeks, bringing 10 days of disruption to students in the pay, pensions and working conditions dispute, with around 6,000 staff in Scotland due to take to the picket line. UCU General Secretary Joe Grady said students and staff had been failed as senior management pushes through brutal pension cuts, and said that it has done nothing to address falling pay, pay inequality, the rampant use of insecure contracts and unmanageable workloads. It is outrageous that when they should be trying to resolve this dispute, employer representatives have instead been finding new ways to deduct pay from university workers, she said. Rather than punishing their workforce, these so-called leaders need to look in the mirror and ask why students support staff taking strike action and why their own workforce is so demoralised. The union said its members had suffered a 20% real terms pay cut over the past 12 years and had been subjected to unmanageable workloads. UCU Scotland is set to hold a rally in Glasgow city centre today with the General Secretary, students, NUS Scotland President Matt Crilly and others set to speak in support of the industrial action. As well as the 5 days of strike action this week, on February 21st to 22nd, staff will walk out at 11 universities in Scotland as part of the dispute. 10 institutions will see staff walk out for 3 days from February 28th in a pay and working conditions dispute. The NUS has said it is supporting the industrial action, with the Student Union and the UCU set to take the campaign to Holyrood on February 22nd in what it described as a rally for education. Grady said, "Students are standing by our members because they know university staff are overworked and underpaid. And they know this sector can afford to treat its workers with dignity. As 10 days of action begins today, Vice-Chancellors urgently need to get around the table and help UCU resolve these disputes." The striking workers in Scotland join those across the UK with staff from 44 universities set to go on strike. To resolve the pensions dispute, the union said it wants universities to accept its proposals for staff and employers to pay slightly more and to reverse its cuts to the university's superannuation scheme pension pot. The UCU has demanded a £2,500 pay rise for all staff, as well as action to tackle unmanageable workloads, pay inequality and the use of insecure and exploitative contracts. A spokesman for USS employers said, "The numbers taking strike action have fallen in every workout since 2018. Only 9% of staff at affected institutions took part in the last strike in December. Universities are well prepared to protect students and ensure they do not miss out on the opportunity to learn during this time. Employers still want to resolve the dispute and will continue to meet with the union, but any solution must be affordable and viable." That article was by Gregor Young. This article is from The National, date 14th February 2022, from the Politics section. UK and Scottish governments agree to put 2 green free ports in Scotland. By Jane MacLeod. The UK and the Scottish Government have agreed there will be 2 green free ports north of the border. The deal between the two governments comes as Boris Johnson is expected to visit Scotland today. The SNP's government partners, the Scottish Greens, have hit out at the proposals and said that they will have nothing to do with this corporate giveaway. Free ports, special economic zones offering tax breaks and lower tariffs for business, are being promoted by the UK government as part of its levelling up agenda. A bidding process will open this spring, and it is hoped the new sites will open in spring 2023. Last year, the Scottish Government said UK ministers risked undermining devolution if they set up free ports in Scotland or Wales without the backing of devolved governments. Ministers in Edinburgh later said they would pursue an alternative model called green ports, but under the new deal they will be known as green free ports. The Prime Minister said free ports will help to accelerate our plan to level up communities across the whole of the United Kingdom. They have the power to be truly transformational by creating jobs and investment opportunities to enable people to reach their potential, and I am delighted that people across Scotland will reap the benefits that will come from having 2 new green free ports. Scotland's Finance Secretary Kate Forbes said, "I am pleased we have been able to reach an agreement on a joint approach that recognises the distinct needs of Scotland and enshrines the Scottish Government's commitment to achieving net zero and embedding fair work practices through public investment." Scotland has a rich history of innovative manufacturers, and so, as we look to grasp the many opportunities of achieving net zero, the establishment of green free ports will help us create new green jobs, deliver a just transition and support our economic transformation. The UK Government has committed funding of £52 million to the project, and bidders will have to pledge to reach net zero by 2045. Ministers from both governments will have a say in the assessment and selection process for the bids. The Scottish Government and the Treasury will use their tax powers, including rates relief, to support the free ports. Under the UK Government's model, free ports are centred around at least one air, rail or seaport, but can extend up to 45 kilometres beyond. The Scottish Government said the term green free port reflected its distinctive net zero aspirations. Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove said, "Green free ports help inject billions into the local economy while levelling up by creating jobs for local people and opportunities for people all over the UK to flourish. By collaborating using opportunities like green free ports, we can work to level up the whole of the UK and bring benefits and opportunities to communities that need it most." However, Ross Greer, the Scottish Greens finance spokesperson, said, "The Greens will have nothing to do with this corporate giveaway. A little greenwashing won't change the grim reality of these free ports. They are yet another way of handling tax breaks and public money to rich corporations despite no evidence that it will create real economic prosperity. That article was by Jane MacLeod. This article is from The National, date 14th February 2022, from the comment section. New technologies can be a good thing for the future of sport, by Maureen McGonigal. Those who've been glued to the TV watching the Winter Olympics have been treated to an amazing spectacle of strength, bravery and skill. All of the disciplines involved offer excitement, and it's fair to say that the 7 new ones introduced for 2022 fit in really well and add that special little something that makes viewing compulsory. The one question I ask myself is, when will a programme become saturated? And if that becomes the case, and it is by necessity one in, one out, are we in danger of losing the heart of the Olympics? Some of the more traditional sports, summer and winter. Is there an argument for another world competition to be set up in the interim years to cater for the growth in new sports? The reason this came to my mind was that I was reading about the fact that pillow fighting could be introduced into the Olympics. It is a recognised sport and its popularity is increasing. PFC, or Pillow Fight Championship, is gaining an audience through pay-per-view television and is offering prize money to the competitors. But where does the training take place? Do you just have a quick pillow fight with your partner before you pop into bed at night and job done? Some of the other new sports I've read about recently are drone soccer, robot soccer, drone racing, speedgate, Segway polo and e-scooter racing. And a lot of these are pulling in some good crowds. In fact, the first Commonwealth Esports Championship is taking place this year in Birmingham and will be held at the same time as the 2022 Commonwealth Games, which has also been hosted by the city. The introduction of new technology into sport is interesting, and as well as offering an alternative pastime to the many people who shy away from traditional sports, it's also delivering some benefits to those who participate in the more established and traditional sports, enabling quicker, faster participation and allowing athletes recovery to speed up, which helps them get back to full fitness for the next challenge. I also feel that, focused in the right direction, this technology will offer a lot of people with a disability to participate in sport. I think this is a really interesting and debatable topic, and currently Scottish Women in Sport is looking at this as a possible theme for our 2022 conference. That article was by Maureen McGonigal.
From The National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the news section, Glasgow University team helps develop tool to save rare water voles, by National News Desk. An interactive map tool has been used to protect one of the UK's most threatened mammals in the face of rapid urban expansion. Researchers from the University of Glasgow, together with partners from Glasgow City Council, Nature Scot and Seven Lochs Westland Park, have produced a digital tool to help identify and protect the habitats of wildlife native to green spaces in and around Glasgow that are up for development, to safeguard a nationally significant water vole species. The groups behind the project say that although city regeneration and expansion are important for Glasgow, this must not come at a cost to the endangered wildlife, in particular the Arvicola amphibius, the European water vole that is native to the dry grasslands that surround Glasgow. The aim of this interactive tool is to identify these habitats, which can then inform decisions of expansion and ensure green spaces home to species like the water vole are sustainably maintained. This project will act as a framework for the creation of similar tools that aim to reduce the negative effects of further urban development and encourage biodiversity. This interactive map is already informing water vole conservation in North East Glasgow and the Seven Lochs Westland Park. Luca and Ellie, lead author of the study from the University of Glasgow, said, "With our work, we wanted to develop a user-friendly tool for conservation that can be used by planners to inform ecological decision-making, increase biodiversity, and reduce human-wildlife conflict in urban environments. This model will be used to inform management of water voles, balance the legal protection of this species, maintain green amenity space for local people, and to inform the planning of building and infrastructure for the socio-economic development of affected areas." Catherine Scott, co-author of the study from Glasgow City Council, also praised this conservation work. She said, "The unique population of urban grassland water voles in Glasgow is a huge biodiversity success. However, it does also present new, unique challenges, and the Council always welcomes partnership working with a range of organisations for new and emerging issues." Scott states that this research will provide further guidance for helping to balance the needs of biodiversity and those of the cities, as green spaces can be a space for families to enjoy. Nida Alfalogi, Conservation Research Manager for People's Trust for Endangered Species, said, "Thankfully, this important work by the team in Glasgow will ensure that the city's water voles are taken into consideration as urban regeneration takes place." Lindsay Kinnes, Nature Scotland Operations Manager in Strathclyde and Ayrshire, added, "We are pleased to see the new tools being used to help create a habitat network for Glasgow's urban water vole population as part of a wider urban regeneration projects for the area." The work by the University of Glasgow is an important step in ensuring that this significant and unique population continues to thrive in the city alongside people. And that was a piece taken from the National News Desk. From the National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the Politics section, Oliver Dowden suggests woke psychodrama is endangering the West, by Angus Cochrane, multimedia journalist. The Conservative Party chairman has suggested a so-called woke psychodrama is damaging the West's ability to stand up to anti-democratic forces, sparking accusations he has squid for a brain. In a major speech on cancel culture, hosted by the Heritage Foundation in the US, Dowden dubbed woke ideology as a dangerous form of decadence at a time when our attention should be focused on external foes. He said a West confident in its values would not be obsessing over pronouns or indeed seeking to decolonise mathematics. Rogue states are seeking to challenge the international order, and at the precise point when our resolve ought to be the strongest, a pernicious new ideology is sweeping our societies, Dowden warned. It goes by many names. In Britain, its adherents sometimes describe themselves as social justice warriors. They claim to be woke, awakened to the so-called truth of our societies. But wherever they are found, they pursue a common policy inimical to freedom. He claimed woke ideology is now everywhere. It's in our universities, but also in our schools, in government bodies, but also in corporations, in social science faculties, but also in the hard sciences, Dowden said. But I tell you, it is a dangerous form of decadence. Just when our attention should be focused on external foes, we seem to have entered this period of extreme introspection and self-criticism. And it really does threaten to sap our societies of their own self-confidence. Just when we should be showing the vitality of our values and the strength of democratic societies, we seem to be willing to abandon those values for the sake of appeasing this new groupthink. Dowden claimed the West had become obsessed by what divides us rather than what unites us. He added, "The US and UK may certainly be very different societies, but we are joined by the same fundamental values. Neither of us can afford the luxury of indulging in this painful woke psychodrama. Too many people have already fallen for the dismal argument that standing up for freedom is reactionary, or that somehow it's kind of virtuous to submit to these self-righteous dogmas. Well, it is plainly is not." Commenting on the senior Tory's remarks, SNP MP Stuart MacDonald commented, "Squid for a brain." Welsh Labour MP Chris Bryant added, "This Oliver Dowden speech is about as vacuous as can be, but it's also dangerous. It implies we should all just tug the forelock to authoritarian views of the world. Liberty comes in many dimensions. And that article is by Angus Cochrane. From the National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the news section. ONS figures. Unemployment stable in Scotland, but alarm raised over wages. By Angus Cochrane, multimedia journalist. Unemployment figures in Scotland have remained largely stable for about half a year, but wages have continued to lag behind soaring inflation. The statistics have prompted demands for the UK government to step up support for struggling families amid the cost of living crisis. Data from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, showed the unemployment rate for those aged 16 and over was 4.1% between October and December last year, which is the same figure as the previous quarter. There was a slight decrease in the employment rate for those aged 16 to 64, which is 74.1% in the latest data, down 0.5% in the period of August to October. This was lower than the UK employment figure for the same age group, which remained at 75.5%, while the unemployment rate for over 16s was the same level, 4.1%, up from 4.2% in the previous quarter. Overall, total pay growth in the UK rose to 4.3% for the quarter to December, from 4.2% for the 3 months to November, but continued to lag behind inflation, which soared to a near 30-year high of 5.4% in December. The ONS said this means that real wages fell once you adjust for inflation over the quarter. It comes as people face mounting pressures from the cost of living crisis, which is expected to worsen soon, with energy bills set to surge in April. SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford commented, "Today's ONS figures, showing real pay fell by 0.8%, underlined the concerns that SNP has about poor wage growth in the past decade of Westminster control. The Tory cost of living crisis is spiralling out of control. The Chancellor must deliver meaningful support to boost incomes." He added, "The SNP has called on the UK government to introduce a real living wage for years, but they refuse. Rishi Sunak must finally listen. He must also reverse Tory cuts to universal credit, match the Scottish Child Payment UK-wide, and turn his energy loan into a more generous grant." Meanwhile, Employment Minister Richard Lochhead said early estimates from HM Revenue and Customs show there were 2.4 million payroll employees in Scotland in January 2022, some 14,000 more than in February 2020, prior to the pandemic. He commented, "Despite a period of further economic uncertainty due to the spread of Omicron, the Scottish Government is firmly focused on doing all we can to seize our economic potential and build an economy of secure, sustainable and satisfying jobs. That is why the 2022-2023 Scottish Budget will invest an additional £68.3 million in employability and training to help businesses address skills shortages and to help build a fairer, more prosperous economy for everyone." ONS Head of Economic Statistics Sam Beckett said overall, across the UK, the number of employees on payrolls rose again in January and is now well above pre-pandemic levels. He said the number of people in employment overall is below where it was before COVID-19 hit due to there being far fewer self-employed people. The survey also shows that unemployment has fallen again and is now only fractionally above where it was before the pandemic, Beckett said. However, over the same period, nearly 400,000 people, mostly the over 50s, have disengaged from the world of work altogether and are neither working nor looking for a job. Sunak commented, "Our £400 billion economic plan has protected our jobs market through the pandemic, and it is now healthier than most could have hoped for. Payrolled employee numbers are at a record high, and redundancies are at an all-time low thanks to our plan for jobs. We're continuing to help more people into work and are providing support for the cost of living worth over £20 billion across this financial year and next." And that was an article written by Angus Cochrane. From the National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the news section. Scottish shipbuilders owed apology after Boris Johnson's visit to Rosyth. Article by Beth Whitelaw. The SNP have demanded Boris Johnson apologises to Scottish shipbuilding for a raft of job losses and a litany of broken promises from his party following his visit to Rosyth. Ahead of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, Better Together politicians told Scotland that independence would cost Rosyth hundreds, if not thousands of jobs, and that voting no would ensure the future of Scotland's shipbuilding industry. In 2014, Rosyth Dockyard employed 2,000 skilled staff, but since, under Tory rule, 450 jobs have been axed. In 2016, Rosyth Dockyard lost out on an aircraft carrier contract when UK government contractor Serco opted for a Dutch company instead. On top of failing to protect jobs, the Westminster government has consistently broken promises made to Scottish shipbuilding on the Type 45 and Type 26 programmes. The UK government promised the Clyde Yards decades of work building 13 Type 26 frigates, which was then reduced to 8. So far, the UK government has only signed a contract for the first 3, with a vague promise to sign a contract for the other 5 in the early 2020s. Spending on Trident has continued to increase, with the UK government announcing a 40% increase in the number of warheads just last year. They also pumped around £500 million into storing and maintaining 20 obsolete submarines since the 1980s, 7 of which are in Rosyth. SNP Defence Procurement spokesperson Dave Duggan MP said, "Successive Westminster governments have overpromised and underdelivered for Scotland's shipbuilding industry time and again. We were told in 2014 that the only way to protect shipbuilding jobs was to vote no, yet since then Rosyth Dockyard has lost at least 450 jobs and lost out on MOD contracts. The North Atlantic and Scotland's security has essentially been sidelined by the Tories at Westminster, and this is wholly unacceptable." And that article was written by Beth Whitelaw.
From The National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the sports section. Novak Djokovic will miss French Open and Wimbledon if mandatory jabs required, by Gregor Young. Novak Djokovic says he is willing to miss the next 2 tennis Grand Slams if the tournaments require mandatory vaccination for competitors. The Serbian star, who is aiming to overtake Rafa Nadal to become the men's player with the most major tournament victories, told the BBC he could skip the French Open and Wimbledon, and potentially ruin his chances of ending his career as the most successful men's player ever. "Yes, that is the price that I'm willing to pay," the world number one said, when asked if he would sacrifice participating in the competitions. "I say that everyone has the right to choose or act or say or feel whatever is appropriate for them." The 34-year-old, who is not vaccinated against COVID-19, said he would forego the tournaments because the principles of decision-making on my body are more important than any title or anything else. "I am trying to be in tune with my body as much as I possibly can," he added. Djokovic distanced himself from the anti-vaccination movement, despite being deported from Melbourne ahead of the Australian Open last month amid concerns about his vaccine status. He said, "I have never said I'm part of that movement. It's really unfortunate that there has been this kind of misconception and wrong conclusion based upon something that I completely disagree with," he added. He told the broadcaster that he was keeping his mind open to the possibility of getting vaccinated in the future, because we are all trying to find collectively a best possible solution to end COVID. "I was never against vaccination. I understand that globally everyone is trying to put a big effort into handling this virus and seeing hopefully an end soon to this virus." Djokovic addressed his deportation from Australia after some had suggested that it was convenient that he had tested positive for COVID in mid-December. The timing allowed him to be granted a medical exemption to attend the tournament. Djokovic said, "I understand that there is a lot of criticism, and I understand that people come out with different theories on how lucky I am or how convenient it is. But no one is lucky and convenient of getting COVID. Millions of people have and are still struggling with COVID throughout the world. So I take this very seriously. I really don't like someone thinking I've misused something in my own favour in order to, get a positive PCR test and eventually go to Australia. I was really sad and disappointed with the way it all ended for me in Australia. It wasn't easy. I was not deported from Australia on the basis that I was not vaccinated, or that I broke any rules, or that I made an error in my visa declaration. The reason why I was deported from Australia was because the Minister for Immigration used his discretion to cancel my visa based on his perception that I might create some anti-vax sentiment in the country or in the city, which I completely disagree with. The Serbian is set to return to action at the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, which begin on February the 21st. Entrants to Dubai do not need to be vaccinated against COVID-19, and it is a tournament Djokovic has won 5 times. Nadal won his 21st Grand Slam title in Australia, moving ahead of Djokovic and Roger Federer on 20. This article was by Gregor Young. From The National, Tuesday, 15th of February 2022, from the sports section. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer tipped for Aberdeen job as Charlie Nicholas urges Dons to make statement, by Aidan Smith. Charlie Nicholas has urged his former club Aberdeen to go out and make a statement with the appointment of their next managers. The Dons sacked Stephen Glass this week just after 11 months in charge at Pittodrie. And now Nicholas would like his old club to go all out and land former Manchester United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The likes of Jack Ross, Jim Goodwin and Paul Lampard have all been mentioned for the vacant position, but Nicholas reckons Solskjaer could be the perfect fit. He wrote in the Daily Express, "If Aberdeen really want to make a statement, they should go and make an attempt to speak to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I was thinking about managerial options for my old club, and I would love them to go out and make a real statement of effect. Why not go and ask the former Manchester United manager if he is interested? He can only say no, but if you don't ask, you don't get. People might say he has just managed one of the biggest clubs in the world. Why would he even consider Aberdeen? I know and I get that, but if you look at Solskjaer's CV away from United, it has been at the likes of Molde and Cardiff. They are clubs who are of similar size and potential to Aberdeen. Why not show some ambition? Go and see if you can get a big name to reignite the fire at Aberdeen again." That article was by Aidan Smith. From The National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the sports section. Rangers chief insists there will be no fire sale at Ibrox, even if they don't win the league, by James Kearney. Stuart Robertson insists there will be no fire sale at Ibrox if Rangers fail to retain their Premiership crown this season. Giovanni van Bronckhorst's side trails rival Celtic by a point with 12 games left to play, including 2 Old Firm derbies. With a guaranteed spot in the group stages of the Champions League on offer for this year's title winners, and upwards of a minimum of £15 million in prize money, whoever triumphs in this year's title race will receive a huge payout. Ibrox defender Nathan Patterson was sold to Everton for around £16 million last month, but Robertson has vowed that there will be no fire sale in Govan if Van Bronckhorst's team are pipped to the title by Celtic. "No, not at all," Rangers managing director told Sky Sports. "We have always said we will sell the right player at the right price and value when it's the right time for Rangers. We are building something long-term. If you look at the history of Scottish football, we won't win the league every year. There will be the odd year when we don't, but you have to have the base and foundations. The long-term viability of the club is first and foremost, and that means trading players. It doesn't mean just selling players. We don't budget to be in the Champions League. If it doesn't happen, hopefully we will finish second and get into the second qualifying round. The ambition and the target is to win the league. Having won it last year, we don't want to stop. That's the target, but if we don't win it, we have got to get on with it. But the focus is to win it." That article was by James Kearney. From The National, Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the sports section. Remaining Rangers versus Celtic clashes this season will have away supporter allocations, by Aidan Smith. Ibrox Managing Director Stuart Robertson has revealed that there will be away allocations at the remaining fixtures between Rangers and Celtic this season. So far this season, the derby clashes have been played in front of just home supporters after a joint decision between both clubs. Celtic were due to receive 700 tickets for away fans to attend the first clash between the big two in August, which finished 1-0 to the Light Blues. However, this was cancelled by the Ibrox outfit, with the match played in front of entirely home supporters. Celtic then followed suit this month as they defeated their city rivals at a packed-out crowd of home supporters at Parkhead. But now Robertson has revealed that the clubs have reached an agreement over future allocations this season. He told Sky Sports there will be away allocations in the next 2 games. Because of the COVID situation we had back in August, the 2 clubs got together and agreed that we wouldn't have away fans. Because we had red zones, we weren't sure what the situation was going to be for that period of time. So there will be away fans for the 2 games remaining. This article was by Aidan Smith.
From The National of Tuesday the 15th of February 2022, from the comments section, The Real Scottish Politics, Boris Johnson Visits North of the UK, by Wee Ginger Doug. On his carefully stage-managed visit to fenced-off parts of what the frothier end of the British nationalist press insists on referring to as certain parts of the UK, where he can be kept well away from any hostile encounters with actual Scottish people, or indeed elected members of the Scottish Conservative Party, the man who is Prime Minister, at least for now, insisted that he is working hard to unite people in Scotland. Certain parts of Scotland, of the UK. It seems that the only people who are prepared to defend Johnson are the same people who are prepared to defend West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma for kicking the crap out of his cat. Johnson is a walking advert for Scottish independence. However, most of the Scottish media don't bother to press Johnson to answer for his lies and corruption, just as they don't bother to press the Scottish Conservatives to explain why they are continuing to back him or to follow through on their previous criticisms and resign. You might think that the press in Scotland would pursue Johnson's numerous lies and his alleged law-breaking, which is now subject to a police investigation, with even a fraction of the zeal they displayed during the investigation into the Scottish Government's handling of the complaints against Alex Salmond. However, they are far too busy terrorising pensioners for that. In a sign of how panic-stricken apologists for Anglo-British nationalism in Scotland are becoming, the desire to avoid referring to Scotland by name in the hope that those pesky Scottish independent supporters will forget that Scotland is a country and will just go away, appears to be spreading from the usual suspects in the Express and the Daily Mail into the BBC. On Good Morning Scotland this morning, presenter Laura Maxwell referred to the north of the UK in an item on Boris Johnson's visit to Scotland. Surely that should be Good Morning certain parts of the UK. Uniting people in Scotland is one goal which Johnson has already achieved and can chalk down as a huge and resounding success. If there is one thing which Johnson has real talent for, it is uniting people who otherwise disagree about everything else, in complete contempt for Boris Johnson. Not even the Scottish Tories want to be associated with him. When even Andrew Body swerves the chance of a photo op with you, you know you've achieved the absolute epitome of pariah status. The truth is that Johnson's visit to Scotland has absolutely nothing to do with trying to persuade anyone in Scotland that he genuinely cares about their interests or concerns. He is here in order to assert that he is in charge, including in certain parts of the UK, and that there are no no-go areas for him. This visit is about demonstrating his authority. It's the political equivalent of a dog peeing on a lamppost to mark its territory. This isn't about what Johnson can do for Scotland, it's about what Scotland can do for Johnson. This country is merely a convenient backdrop for him to prove his credentials to the only voters in the UK who matter, those on the Conservative benches in Westminster. This piece is an extract from today's Real Scottish Politics newsletter, which is emailed out at 7 p.m. every weekday with a roundup of the day's top stories and exclusive analysis from the Wee Ginger Dug.
Recorded from the National on the 15th of February 2022, from the Culture section, from Glasgow to Havana, the story behind Scotland's 188 twin cities, by Anita Bandani. Here in Scotland, we take pride in being part of a wider international community. Being a small part of a larger world shapes our identity, and somewhere this is especially evident are in the links we share with 188 sister towns and twin cities around the globe. But what are the stories behind some of these? We've taken a delve into a select few to find out. Dundee, Nablus, Palestine. The ties between Dundee and Nablus were established in 1980 when the mayor of Nablus, Bassam Shaka, travelled to the UK for surgery after his car was booby-trapped. According to the Dundee Nablus Twinning Association, there had been a trade union links between Dundee and Palestine for a while, which set precedent the move, which was officially formalised in 1996. In 2015, a Dundee street, Nablus Avenue, was named in recognition of this twinning. Referred to by some as the uncrowned Queen of Palestine, Nablus is a city rich with history and culture, a very fitting pairing for Scotland's city of discovery indeed. Eastern Bartonshire, Yochi, Japan. One of the oldest twinning links in the UK, this twinning was formalised in 1988 and involves a tale of romance, chance and whiskey. Masataka Taketsuru, a Japanese chemist and businessman, first came to Glasgow as a student in 1918, studying organic chemistry and distilling. Training in various distilleries across the Highlands, he met and fell in love with Rita Cowan from Kirkintilloch, and they married in 1920 against many of their family members' wishes. In 1921, the lovers moved to Japan, and in 1934 they moved from the mainland to Yochi, where together they constructed a Scottish-style whisky distillery. The company formed from this, Nika Whisky Distilling Company, is one of the largest producers of whisky in Japan today. Rita passed away in 1961 and Masataka in 1979. Although they have passed on, their story is kept alive in the unlikely twinning relationship between the two towns. Glasgow, Havana, Cuba. From the dreary skies of Glasgow to the palm trees of Havana, these two cities have more than you may expect in common, from shared ritual cultural and art scenes to the engaged political consciousness which characterizes both locals. The pairing was established in 2002. The relationship is ongoing some 20 years later. In 2014, the Havana Glasgow Film Festival, HGFF, was born, which continues to showcase and celebrate Cuban film and culture for new and old audiences alike in Glasgow to this day. Edinburgh, San Diego, California. For those unaware, Greyfriars Bobby has a twin, San Diego's vagabond dog, Bum. Bum was San Diego's town dog after stowing away in a ship to the sandy shores of San Diego back in 1886. The next time you're in Edinburgh, make sure to visit the statue of Bum in West Princess Street Gardens, gifted by the people of San Diego through the Twinning Association established back in 1977. And if in turn you ever find yourself in California, in downtown San Diego at the Gaslamp Quarter, you'll find a Greyfriars Bobby statue in homage of our own canine hero. That article was by Anita Bandani. Recorded from the National on the 15th of February 2022, from the Culture section. Walking the West Highland Way, How to Make Sure Your Experience is Unforgettable, by Jane MacLeod. Walking the West Highland Way is an unforgettable experience. The panoramic views after a long slog uphill, The people you meet along the way, the midges. The National has compiled a list of some top tips for walking the 96-mile trail. This list isn't exhaustive and aims to venture beyond the basic rules of outdoor activities. It goes without saying, but comfortable, good quality walking shoes and waterproofs are critical if you want to actually enjoy yourself. It is Scotland after all, and you have to prepare for all kinds of weathers. 1. What kind of West Highland Way experience do you want? Before you set off, take time to decide what your priorities for the walk are. Do you want to have time to revel in the scenery, meet new friends, or maybe test yourself physically? Unless you're looking for a more challenging experience, completing the 96-mile trail over a minimum of 7 days is probably the most sensible option. 7 days is still a rewarding challenge, but this option leaves you with enough time for a bit of exploring en route, and you won't feel too pushed for time during the day. Taking the 5-day option means you will be walking a minimum of 19 miles each day, which can often be more challenging than people imagine, particularly if the weather is bad or you're walking slower because of any injuries or blisters. However, if a challenge is your thing, maybe this is the route for you. Number 2. What time of year will you be walking? Think about the time of year you will be setting off. Completing the trail earlier in the year around April or May time means the weather may be colder and wetter, but also means far fewer midges. However, if you'd prefer a slightly better chance of warmer days, you might be better walking the trail in summer. It'll also be far busier during the summer months, so bear this in mind in terms of accommodation. If you're looking for solace, walking the trail in July or August isn't the best time to get the path to yourself. September or October might be better. Number 3. A quick assembling tent. If you're planning on camping, make sure you're well practiced at assembling your tent. At the end of your walking day, you don't want to be fumbling around with instructions and trying to work out what goes where. You want to be able to assemble your tent in 5 to 10 minutes and get your stuff inside, especially if it's raining. Number 4. Bag carrying company. Again, unless you want a physical challenge or a total glutton for punishment, a bag transfer company is the way to go if you're carrying your own camping gear. There are plenty of options to choose from, such as AMS Baggage Company or Baggage Freedom. These companies are well versed in the routine and can pick up and drop off your bag at the various campsites and accommodations you're staying in along the way. Bring a day pack to carry basic essentials like water, food, and extra layers. Number 5. A pair of dry, lightweight shoes. At the end of a long, hard day, it's nice to be able to strip off your wet and probably sweaty boots and replace them with something breathable and dry. This type of footwear is also ideal when you're using communal showers at a campsite. Crocs and flip-flops can also easily be attached to the outside of a backpack to free up space inside your bag with a carabiner clip. Number 6. Foot care. On the subject of feet, it's good to take care of them along the way. If you feel your feet getting too hot or sore, it's good to take a 10-minute break, particularly during the summer months. It can be beneficial to give your feet cold water baths along the way. There are plenty of places throughout the journey to dunk your feet, from rivers, lochs to ice-cold springs. Some walkers swear by petroleum jelly or Vaseline and recommend rubbing it onto the feet after drying them to ease chafing. In case of the dreaded blisters, Compedes are an absolute lifesaver. Make sure you're well stocked up. Number 7. Get some perspective. Travelling can also be made far more meaningful with a little insight into the area you're journeying through. The same goes for walking. Why not watch a documentary or read a book on the history of the trail before you set off? Maybe you enjoy being able to identify the name of a specific tree or bird that you come across along the way. If so, a book on Scottish plants or animals might be a good choice. Number 8. At least one night under a roof to dry your clothes and boost morale. Particularly during the wetter months of the year, a night guaranteed under a dry roof can often be a real morale booster. Although it won't be within everyone's budget, one night in a cabin or hotel room can really make all the difference, as it allows you the chance to wash and dry some of your wet gear, take a hot shower, and get a good night's sleep. Somewhere around the halfway mark is a good place to make this splurge. 9. Plan your meals. It's essential to know where your next hot meal is coming from. Although many stopping points like Tyndrum or Kinlochleven have supermarkets and restaurants, if you're spending a night wild camping or in a more rural campsite, it's critical you have something that will replace the energy you burned from a day of walking. Breakfast-wise, porridge oats can be carried in a plastic bag and cooked up with water, or if you bring a wide enough pan for your camping stove, you can fry sausages or bacon for some rolls. You could even make extra to cover you for lunch that day. Number 10. Good company. Walking the West Highland Way can make or break any relationship. If you're choosing to walk the trail with others, make sure they are the kind of people who make you feel supported and comfortable, and it never hurts to have someone who can make you laugh. There are times you'll need it. The West Highland Way tests relationships, but it also binds them together. You'll have a lifetime of memories to share, and in retrospect, even the really horrible moments will make you smile. That article was by Jane MacLeod.
The National. Politics. On Wednesday the 16th of February. Jean Freeman lands a top job with the University of Glasgow. An article written by Angus Cochrane, multimedia journalist. Jean Freeman has landed a top job at the University of Glasgow, it's been announced. The former Health Secretary, who stood down from Parliament in May 2021, is joining the university's College of Medical, Veterinary and Life Sciences, or MVLS. The ex-SNP MSP has been appointed to a part-time role of Ambassador for Community Engagement, Public Health and Innovation, with immediate effect. The university says she'll play an active role in the £91 million Living Laboratory project in Govan, which, in collaboration with the NHS and industry partners, will see the acceleration of pioneering research into a real-world clinical setting. Ms Freeman was an MSP for Carrick, Cumnock and the Doon Valley from 2016 until 2021, when she stepped down at the Holyrood election. She had previously served as Minister for Social Security before being appointed to the Health and Sport position in June 2018. In the latter role, she helped lead the country's response to the COVID-19 crisis when it struck in 2020. The former minister says she is delighted to take up the new role, adding, "The university leads many world-changing projects, all poised to create real-world impact for people locally, nationally and internationally. I'm particularly excited to play a role in the Living Laboratory project in Govan, where working together with all partners, we can realise health benefits for patients and our NHS." The College of MVLS is home to more than 2,500 staff and 7,000 students and has a turnover exceeding £200 million per annum. The college aims to produce world-changing improvements in health and bring economic growth to the city of Glasgow. Professor Ian McInnes, University of Glasgow Vice Principal and the head of the College of MVLS, said, "We're absolutely delighted that someone of Ms Freeman's calibre will be joining the college. Ms Freeman's experience will be a very welcome addition to the university, and we're confident that it'll help us achieve our ambitious aims across a wide range of innovative projects to improve the health and lives of the people of Glasgow, Scotland and beyond." The appointment was also welcomed by the Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, who added, "I'm extremely pleased to welcome Ms Freeman to the University of Glasgow in what will be an important role that harnesses her expertise in health policy and community engagement. Ms Freeman's background as one of Scotland's most prominent and respected politicians, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, will be invaluable in making a success of this new role." An article written by Angus Cochrane. The National. News on Wednesday the 16th of February. Scottish firm to stage dress rehearsals of rocket launch. An article written by Emily Gulbis. The first rocket launch platform built in the UK for more than 50 years is being prepared for dress rehearsals after arriving on site. It was transported 80 miles on 2 trucks from Peterhead to Kinloss near Orbex's headquarters in Forres on a 3-hour journey accompanied by a police escort. The launch platform, named Orbex LP1 and weighing more than 40 tonnes, was then lifted by crane onto the rocket launch test site. This structure was made by Motive Offshore Group, a Scottish company based in Banff in Aberdeenshire that specialises in designing and manufacturing marine and lifting equipment. Orbex said the launch pad had been built and tested to meet strict international standards across highly regulated industry sectors. The launch pad will allow Orbex to test its Prime rocket, which is a micro-launcher designed to send small satellites into low Earth orbit. Although this can't take place in Kinloss, Orbex will use this site for a dress rehearsal before the real launch of the rocket when it's transported to the spaceport in Sutherland. Small satellites weighing under 150 kilograms, such as the Orbex Prime rocket, in polar orbits pass above both the North and South Poles several times a day. With the Earth's rotation, these satellites can capture the entirety of the Earth's surface several times a week, which is useful for Earth observation and global communications. Developing technology and applications for space exploration is a key focus of Orbex. Orbex has its headquarters and production and testing facilities in Scotland, with additional designing and testing facilities in Denmark. Its staff come from organisations such as NASA, the European Space Agency, and other spaceflight institutions, and Orbex's main funding comes from investors including BGF and Octopus Ventures. Trying different materials and techniques to develop launch vehicles for reducing the environmental impact of space exploration is another focus of Orbex. An example of this is Orbex's use of biopropane fuel, a renewable which cuts carbon emissions by 90% compared with hydrocarbon fuel. Orbex said its environmental approach to space exploration dramatically improves the carbon footprint and life cycle impact of the Orbex launch vehicle. An article written by Emily Gulbis. The National News on Wednesday the 16th of February. Twitter bans Ruth Wishart after Scots language autocorrect slip-up. An article written by Gregor Young. Twitter temporarily banned a columnist for The National after a misunderstanding involving Scots and autocorrect. Ruth Wishart, who writes weekly for the Sunday National, had attempted to leave a complimentary message on a pretty innocuous picture of a dog named Stanley. Musician Curtis Stigers had shared a photo of his Bernedoodle, that's a cross between a Bernese mountain dog and a poodle. It's Stanley's first birthday today, he wrote. Ruth attempted to leave a kind message below, but all didn't go to plan after an autocorrect mix-up. Instead of writing the Scots term "sonsie laddie," Ruth found herself commenting "so die laddie." The inadvertent message led to Ruth being temporarily banned from the social media site. Fortunately, the ban didn't last long. Writing a few hours later, Ruth said, "Hello tweeters, I seem to be unbanned. How crass of me to use the old Scots tongue in a tweet." She told The National, "I saw a pic of a really nice pooch on Twitter this morning and replied saying "sonsie laddie." Unfortunately, Twitter autocorrected this to "so die laddie" and locked my account for violating their guidelines. I probably should have paid more attention before pressing tweet, but it was very early in the morning. I got David Pratt to tweet out my dilemma, as the last time I didn't tweet for a while, a neighbour came round to make sure I wasn't lying behind the door, getting eaten by the dog. Seems to have done the trick, as I'm back on. An article by Gregor Young.
The National, February 17. Babcock claims that Rosyth Yard could close post-independence rubbished. Report by Hamish Morrison. Claims a Scottish shipbuilding firm could quit the country after independence have been rubbished. David Lockwood, the head of engineering giant Babcock, said the company might relocate its Rosyth yard to England if it were made to feel unwelcome in an independent Scotland. Thousands of jobs have been supported by the 300-acre Fife Yard in recent years, and the Queen Elizabeth-class aircraft carriers were built there. Lockwood told the Courier that independence was something the firm could manage, adding, "When you look at the timelines, there's nothing we can't manage as a company." But he said if the firm was told we weren't welcome here in Scotland, it may leave the country in the event it exits the Union. His claims have been questioned by some, with the Rosyth local MP saying he was disappointed by the comments. Dunfermline and West Fife MP Douglas Chapman added, "I have consistently supported Babcock and the Rosyth workforce. They make a very valuable and significant contribution to our economy. They operate and are welcomed in many independent countries globally, and independent Scotland will be no different." SNP Defence spokesperson Stuart MacDonald said the yard would be not just welcome but vital in an independent Scotland. He said, Important to note, independence described as manageable for Babcock, but would only leave if made to feel unwelcome. Babcock is not just an important employer, but would play a crucial role in an independent Scotland's defence capability. Not just welcome, but vital. The Glasgow MP noted the defence sector was a well-established part of the UK economy, adding, "It is vital that we can show that the future of that industry has a place here with independence. It's not just the right thing to do for people's jobs, but for our own defence and security posture too." Lockwood spoke after the Prime Minister visited the Fife shipyard on Monday and saw work being carried out to build the first new Type 31 frigate for the Royal Navy. Lockwood told the Courier he welcomed the deal announced recently between the Scottish and UK governments for 2 green free ports in Scotland. Asked about a second independence referendum, he told the newspaper, "I lived in Scotland for 10 years, and it was a rumbling thing then, and I think it's just going to be a rumbling thing. I think in reality there will be plenty of warning if the vote were in favour of independence. There would then be a negotiation period, and at the end of the negotiation period, there would be an implementation period. I don't think there is anything that we cannot manage as a company. When you look at the timelines, there's nothing we can't manage as a company. If we had to replicate this in England, because we were told we weren't welcome here, which I think would be a bad mistake for Scotland, but if that were the decision, we can replicate this in 3 years, and the time window of negotiations is longer than that. It's not ideal, but it is manageable." An SNP spokesperson said, "The people of Scotland delivered a clear democratic mandate to the Scottish Government to hold a referendum on independence within the first half of this Parliament, COVID permitting, and that is what we are committed to doing. Scotland is already one of the most attractive places in the world to do business, and the evidence clearly shows that Scotland has the talent and ambition to build a prosperous economy, drive economic recovery, and raise competitiveness." Report by Hamish Morrison. The National, February 17. Jacob Rees-Mogg claims Brexit has been extremely beneficial as trade plummets. Report by Angus Cochrane. The UK government's new Brexit Opportunities Minister has claimed there is little evidence to suggest Brexit has damaged trade, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Jacob Rees-Mogg, during a visit to the port of Felixstowe in Suffolk, claimed that Brexit has been extremely beneficial for Britain. That's despite a recent report from Westminster's Public Accounts Committee concluding the only detectable impact of leaving the EU so far has been to increase the burden on businesses. New ONS trade figures also show UK exports to the EU have fallen by £20 billion since 2018. And a survey published by the British Chambers of Commerce this week found 71% of businesses feel the UK's Brexit deal is not enabling them to grow or increase sales. In the first 10 months of 2021, exports to the EU were down by 12% on pre-pandemic levels, while imports were down by 20%. Nevertheless, Rees-Mogg, who was appointed to his new role earlier this month, said a recent decline in exports was a result of pandemic-related trade disruption. The Tory minister told the BBC, COVID had caused the most enormous disruptions to supply chains. We have had containers simply being stuck in the wrong place, being stuck in Chinese ports, being stuck in the port of Los Angeles. This has been a global trade issue, and we do have to recover from the problems of COVID. Pressed on whether leaving the EU was to blame, Rees-Mogg said, "I think Brexit has been extremely beneficial for the country. I think the evidence that Brexit has caused trade drops is few and far between." In its report, the Public Accounts Committee recognised it is difficult to untangle how much of the hit to trade since the end of the Brexit transition on December 31, 2020, has been caused by the pandemic and how much by Brexit. But the cross-party MPs found it was clear that EU exit has had an impact. In October, the Office for Budget Responsibility reported that both imports and exports with the EU had been affected by Brexit, and that both were on track to end up 15% lower as a result of the UK leaving the EU. It cited a study from the Centre for European Reform, which warned that month that the UK's trade in goods with the EU was 15.7%, equating to £12.6 billion, lower than it would have been without Brexit. Last week, Scotland Food and Drink Chief Executive James Withers rubbished claims that leaving the EU had enhanced global Britain. Speaking after Rees-Mogg was named Minister for Brexit Opportunities, Withers said he had yet to find evidence of any benefits, adding that many exporters have simply given up on trading with EU companies. He also called for action to cut the tsunami of red tape facing businesses since Brexit, and warned the worst trade disruption was yet to come. During his visit to Felixstowe, Rees-Mogg insisted Brexit was already a success and vowed to cut through the thicket of red tape. Report by Angus Cochrane.
Recorded from the National on the 17th of February 2022 from the Culture section. How the tragedy that befell Clan Douglas may have inspired Game of Thrones by Hamish Macpherson. Last week I began this short series on the great lowland clans by describing how the Douglas family came to prominence largely through the efforts of William the Hardy and his son Sir James the Black Douglas, longtime friend and ally of King Robert the Bruce. I will return to Sir James in a future column in my next series about men and women who shaped Scotland without taking the throne. This week I will show how Clan Douglas split into two lines, the Black Douglases of Douglasdale and the Red Douglases of Angus. There would later be many more branches of this mighty clan, and some of its leading figures would play a major part in Scottish and indeed British history, yet the Douglas clan today has no formally recognised chief. I'll explain why next week. Given the historical facts about the Douglases, there will be some gruesome details in this week's column, but I will try and keep them to a minimum. Though they outgrew the village of Douglas and its castle, the family for many generations kept to a Douglas tradition by being buried in St Bride's Kirk, which effectively became a mausoleum for the Black Douglas line. You can see their memorials in the kirk to this day. The split into the Black and Red Douglases came because of tragedy, when James, the second Earl of Douglas and Earl of Mar, was killed fighting the English at the Battle of Otterburn in 1388. He was the son of the first Earl of Douglas and Margaret, Countess of Mar, and had married Princess Isabel, daughter of King Robert II, but had no legitimate children at the time of his death. He did have two illegitimate sons, William and Archibald, the ancestor of the clan's branches of Douglas of Drumlarrig and Douglas of Cavers. It was his sister Isabel, Countess of Mar, who inherited a lot of the Douglas property, but the title and most of the Douglas lands passed to the second Earl's cousin, Archibald, the illegitimate son of Sir James Douglas Hugh. The Lord of Douglas perhaps should have inherited all, but his nickname the Dull suggests he was a simpleton, and he was persuaded to pass the earldom to Archibald, who was an important personality in the development of the Black Douglases. He was a warrior who had fought for the French against the English at the Battle of Poitiers, and who had then become Lord of Galloway in 1369 after a series of successful battles to oust the English occupiers from southern Scotland. He duly built a new power base, Thrieve Castle, whose iconic ruins still stand on an island in the River Dee near Castle Douglas. Archibald, 1330 to 1400, has come down to us largely thanks to his nickname, the Grim. He got that name from the English troops that he ousted from Lochmaben Castle in 1385, with one Scottish chronicler writing, "He was called Archibald Grim by the Englishmen because of his terrible counterface and warfare." He married well in 1362 to Joan or Johanna Moray, the Lady of Bothwell, a dynastic arrangement which brought several estates across Scotland to Archibald, and which also appears to have been a happy marriage as they had numerous children. He was also not so grim as he was painted. He endowed several church institutions and was known for his chivalrous behaviour as long as he wasn't fighting. As third Earl of Douglas and the most powerful lord in southern Scotland, Archibald the Grim imposed his law and order on the border chieftains, and he also secured a royal marriage for his son and heir, also Archibald, to King Robert III's daughter, Princess Margaret. Most important of all, he arranged for his daughter Marjorie to marry David Stewart, Duke of Rosse, and heir to the throne. That later marriage would end in tragedy, as Rosse's uncle, Robert Stewart, the Duke of Albany, was regent of Scotland due to Robert III's illnesses, and was in no mood to relinquish his power, arranging for his nephew to be imprisoned on trumped-up charges. The fourth Earl of Douglas, Archibald, known perhaps erroneously as the Tineman or Loser, also turned against Rosse, accusing their heir to the throne of gross misconduct against his sister Marjorie. The Douglas Earl was implicated in the plot to imprison Rosse, who died in the pit of Falkland Palace. Funnily enough, though he was just 24 and fit, an inquiry said he died of natural causes and cleared Albany and Douglas of all blame. The fourth Earl has a claim to fame as one of the few Scottish characters in the plays of William Shakespeare, outside of Macbeth. As Archibald the Douglas, he features in Henry IV, Part 1, and is captured by Henry Hotspur, only to be released to fight in the rebellion against Henry, in which he kills Sir Walter Blunt, or Blount, and nearly gets the king too. Those were true events, but the scene after the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403, where he is freed because of his courage and chivalry, is an invention, as Douglas was held captive for several years. He would later join the French war against Henry V of England, and in 1424 responded to a personal plea from King Charles VII of France to come to his aid. For doing so, he was made Duke of Touraine and appointed Lieutenant General of the French army, the first foreigner to be made a French Duke. He enjoyed the title for just a few months, as he was killed in the disastrous, for the French and Scots, Battle of Vernu, with his son James also among the dead. Meanwhile, the Red Douglas line was getting going. George Douglas, 1380 to 1403, was the illegitimate son of William, the first Earl of Douglas, and Margaret Stuart, the Countess of Angus, Dowager Countess of Mar, and Lady Arbuthnot, titles which she held in her own right. She was one of the most powerful women in the land, and seems to have dominated the weak, King Robert III persuading him to allow her son George to marry the king's daughter, Princess Mary, upon which marriage George became Earl of Angus and gained more land and titles from his half-sister Isabel, the Countess of Mar. George Douglas, Earl of Angus, was captured by the English at the Battle of Homildon Hill in 1402, and died from the plague in captivity a year later at the age of 22 or 23. George's son, the second Earl of Angus, inherited the title at the age of 4, and when King James I was captured and imprisoned by the English in 1406, it seemed he might be sent south as a hostage by the Duke of Albany. He escaped that fate and was one of the nobles who greeted King James when he returned to Scotland in 1424. James purged his court of the Albany Stuarts, and the Earl of Angus and his cousin, the 5th Earl of Douglas, sat on the jury which condemned the second Duke and his 2 sons and their ally, the Earl of Lennox, to death by beheading for treason. James himself met a grisly end, assassinated in Perth on February 20th, 1437, and he was succeeded by his son James II, then only 6. At this point, the Black Douglases reached the new zenith of power, as the Earl of Douglas was appointed Lieutenant General and Regent of Scotland until his death in 1439. His son and heir William was 15, his younger son David about 9. The following year, 3 powerful men decided to try and seize power for themselves. They were William Creton, First Lord Creton and Lord Chancellor of Scotland, Sir Alexander Livingston of Callander, James Douglas, Earl of Avondale, a favourite of James I and second son of Archibald the Grim, is also said to have been involved in the plot that became known as the Black Dinner, but evidence for that is scanty. What certainly did happen is that having become 6th Earl of Douglas, William and his brother David were invited to dine at Edinburgh Castle in the presence of the 10-year-old James II. Legend has it that a black bull's head, a symbol of death, was laid on the table before the men of Creton and Livingston seized the 2 youths. They were subject to a mock trial, and despite the young king's protests, they were similarly executed for treason by being beheaded in the castle courtyard. This event is said to have partly inspired George R.R. Martin to write the infamous Red Wedding scene for Game of Thrones. Sir Walter Scott described the event thus: Edinburgh Castle, Toon and Tower, God grant thou sink for sin, and that e'en for the Black Dinner, Earl Douglas gate therein. The Earl of Avondale promptly became the 7th Earl of Douglas and clan chief, and controlled vast areas of Scotland, though he only lived for 3 years after the Black Dinner, which may have been due to his corpulence. He was known as James the Gross. One can only imagine what effect the event had on James II, and he certainly displayed symptoms of mental upset in later life, not least because of what he did to William Douglas, the 8th Earl and Lord of Galloway and Lauderdale. Well aware that he was seen as the chief magnate of Scotland and a possible threat to James II, this Lord Douglas wanted out of Scotland, possibly for safety reasons, and went on pilgrimage to Rome. While he was abroad, King James attacked several Douglas properties because there had apparently been insults and damage done to neighbours. He returned in August 1451, and early the following year he received a summons to attend upon the king at Stirling Castle. The summons was conveyed by Sir William Lauder of Halton, a friend and relative of the Douglases. Lauder also brought a letter of safe conduct for the Earl signed by the king, and this seems to have reassured him about his safety. It was nothing of the sort. On February 22nd, 1452, William Douglas was told by the king that he must dissolve a pact for mutual protection that he had formed with the Earl of Crawford and the Earl of Ross, Lord John of Ailey, chief of Clan Donald. Douglas refused, and James II lost his temper and promptly drew his dagger, more probably a dirk, before stabbing the Earl 26 times. Other nobles joined in, and Sir Patrick Grey completed the assassination by bashing out his brains with a poleaxe, as one chronicle puts it. The Earl's body was thrown out the window into the garden below. As the Earl had no legitimate children, William's brother James became the 9th Earl of Douglas. He rallied the Douglas forces and marched on Stirling with the king's letter of safe conduct attached to the horse's tail. Joining the king's side, however, were the Red Douglases in the person of George Douglas, 4th Earl of Angus. James Douglas's allies deserted him, and he fled to England. As recently as 1448, the 2 branches of the Douglases had fought alongside each other in winning the Battle of Sark, but now relationships were sundered, and with the 9th Earl still in England, the Earl of Angus and his allies in the border families fought the Battle of Arkenholme and smashed the Black Douglases once and for all. The 9th Earl and his family were attainted, and the title of Earl of Douglas, and thus the clan chieftainship, were given to the Red Earl of Angus. Next week we'll see how it all ended. That article was by Hamish Macpherson.
And that was this week's The National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.